Hi everyone, Geraldine Anillo today here with James Sampliner. Hey James.
Hey, how are you? How
I'm
are you
so
out there
good.
in the FB universe? Everybody okay?
FB Facebook. I'm like the FB universe. What could
The
that stand
FB
for?
universe.
Everyone, if you are watching live, put your comments in. So just so we all know, I posted today about this class you're doing for us tomorrow on Airbnb
Yeah,
and soul orchestrations, and somebody put
yeah,
on there wrote, "I've had Olive Garden with a man. James Sampliner is a real
yeah.
deal." So just so we know for the record, because my answer to this comment was, "Oh, what did you eat? Make us dream and live vicariously through you," with pasta emoticon, just to make sure my point was coming
Right,
across.
right,
And I
right.
followed on about all my favorite Olive Garden food, to which you
Yes.
very logically responded, "I don't think that's what this comment was about, Geraldine." So let's set the record straight right now.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
did understand that the point of Brian's comment was that you're wonderful and great, and I
Good.
agree. So now the record is straight. We are now ready to
The
start it.
important thing though is that I'm an ardent unsupporter of the Olive Garden. I'm not usually at the Olive Garden. I don't admire their food. Like that's not my thing.
It's like you never want it. Okay, cool.
Didn't want it. Was put there under duress.
So Brian did not have your authorization
Well, it
to.
wasn't even Brian's fault. It was somebody else's fault, and I don't want to talk about him either.
All right, all
Because
right.
he knows who he is.
Oh, I think I know who this is. Someone who
Yeah.
mentioned maybe the fact that it should be, if it's the Olive Garden on Times Square, it counts.
No, it wasn't that person either. But he knows who he is out there in the world.
Well, the record be straight. You're an amazing musician. You've music directed a gazillion Broadway shows, and we're going to be geeking out about them today and about
Nice.
Airbnb and Soul. For all of you watching live, please put your questions in. Before we start going in, I have a
Yeah.
question for you. I
Yeah.
was lucky enough to do Songs for a New World, which is one of my favorite shows because musically it is a dream. And I just want to know, I'm going to shoot something at you and you tell me all your thoughts on this. First four measures of King of the World. Go.
Okay, so let's back up to 2004 when Billy Porter and I were doing a show at Joe's Pub, and he put that in front of me, and I hadn't played it in about 3 or 4 years, and I was like, oh God. And then he told me we were going to record it, and I was like, oh God, those first four bars. So I sat there and I was like, no. I went through the whole thing. And I was like, and I finally got it, but I didn't get it to the point where it was like really great. So I kind of went in maybe later in post and kind of did it better. Fast forward then to like Jason and I are talking like maybe a couple years later. And I was like, man, those first four bars. And he's like, what? I was like, it took forever for me to figure out the fingering and like the rhythmic pattern. It seemed kind of like, I don't know, improvised. And he was like, James, he's like, I always improvise that each of the 100 shows that we did at at theater for whatever that the first theater off Broadway, and I was like, wait, what? He's like, I had to put something on the page, and I was like, couldn't there have been a thing that said, I improvise these? He's like, no, it actually is more fun to watch people sweat it out, and so the answer is that it is an improvised four bars to get you in the mood of something that is a little bit more kind of, you know what I mean? It gets you that mood of feeling that the world is coming in. Do you know what I mean?
I
And so he
do.
just improvised that bass stuff to get into the riff. And also, if you don't know this, that the original key of that song is in G, because that's where Jason sings it. And for Billy, up a fourth.
So it's kind of a test. Like if you are in the
Yeah,
know, you know not
yeah,
to play those four bars are written. But if you
that's
just bought the
correct.
score and you're doing it,
Right.
one of those
But it
fun
is
things.
it is a good pattern to learn though, because it's an interesting way to kind of set it up, and it gets you into the mindset of where Jay is when he's improvising. But don't worry if you can't nail that. It's the other stuff. Even that lick where it's that the this one. That's just a written pattern. That's not like anything that was like set in stone. It's just written for you to have something to play. But every time he plays that song, it's something different. And I do the same thing. Like if I do it with Titus, I'll play a completely different introduction, or I'll go on for like 5-10 minutes doing improvisations or whatever. So just know that. But there's stuff that the one that's this one, this the five pattern, the one that's what I can't do it now, but that one's you have to do that one.
Yeah,
So
pick
those are the
and
things.
know when to improvise and know when to be
Yes.
truthful to the music. When you
Yes.
do improvise, like what you said when you're playing with Titus, do you
Yeah.
ever have some favorite sections or hooks that you do that you kind of come back to and improvise from because you just enjoy them so much?
No, it's got to be in the moment. It has to be. First of all, usually if I'm doing it in a concert with anybody, be it Billy or Titus or whoever, wherever it comes in the program, hopefully by then I've felt out the crowd a little bit, and I can feel their energy and what they've been kind of like latching onto a little bit. So I'll start with something maybe simple, and then grow to stuff where I feel them feeding it back to me, and then we have a dialogue back and forth. So there's nothing really set ever. I try not to use the same licks in a lot of spots. Sometimes I do, but very rarely.
All right, we've got another question here. This one is from Johan, who says, "Is Legally Blonde the one musical you've music directed that had the most key changes?"
Yes. I don't even have to think about that. Yes.
So I do want to talk
It's
about Larry O'Keefe. Oh, were you going
yeah.
to go on about the key changes?
Nope.
Lots of key changes, that's for sure.
Yes.
Well, so Larry O'Keefe, I was lucky enough to do Heathers. And what I found fascinating, and I think, tell me if I'm wrong, that is true with Legally Blonde, is Larry's ability to do really poppy, catchy pop tunes with really interesting underlining harmonies and bass lines.
Correct.
What
A
was
lot
that
of
like for you working on Legally Blonde?
Well, it was amazing because I came in very much at the tail end of the workshop process, right before we went to Broadway or right before we went to Seattle straight away, or San Francisco. And because I was coming in late to the party, a lot of it was kind of like the bones of it were basically there. The skeleton was there, and that was up to me and Larry to get it all fleshed with Nell and working with Jerry on the dance stuff. The thing about Blonde is that there's the one section at the end of So Much Better that everybody always asks about, where the harmonies were in D flats, like that thing, whatever that thing, I can't remember. But it's that thing at the end where they're going and then the harmonies in the vocal parts, there's something that doesn't line up with the bass note, and people have asked me that for years. They're like, why are those notes opposite? And it's because that's the way Larry writes. There's a G natural in the tenor part, I think, or in the baritone part, and there's a G flat in the bass, and that's deliberate. It's because that's the way Larry thinks. He likes to put in things that make tension and release happen in unexpected places. So like in a tune like Positive, it has very straight ahead stuff, but the key changes and the relationships between the key changes of the chorus and the verses are all different for a very deliberate reason.
What did you put of yourself in Legally Blonde?
In Kyle, in his like porn music, there's a lot of me in that group. There's a lot of me in that group, but there's a lot of like fingerprints. Larry and I both really kind of wrote Blood in the Water together. First of all, and Alex Lackamore was the first arranger before I came on. So then he had to go to do this little show called In the Heights. So he had to go, and I came in, and then so there are fingerprints of all three of us throughout the whole score. There's some of Alex, some of me, some of Larry.
That's epic. Here's another question now. And everyone, remember, if you want to ask questions, put them in the comments and I'll ask them for you. This is a question from Alexander, who says, what was the moment in a show that you've done that terrified you the most music-wise?
That terrified me the most? Nothing's really ever terrified. There's nothing that I've been in a pure panic to play live. I don't think there's been anything that's really given me. There's been stuff that's been difficult to practice, or to get in my body. But, you have to remember that I'm kind of trained in both the reading and the Suzuki method. So I read it, but I also internalize it by listening to it. So sometimes I'll like enter it in my DAW in my sequencer and then listen to me play it back and look at it go by and see if I can internalize it that way. So nothing's ever terrified me on the stand. Maybe there's this one Ricky Ian Gordon song at the top of the Broadway and Soul album I did for Billy called Heaven that was really short, but it was a tricky little song on the Banana. And that terrified me maybe like right before until we went on stage with the band, and then I was fine. But none of Jason's stuff, none of Adam's stuff, although there's a bunch in Piazza that kind of I've been playing with recently, but nothing really terrifies me until I work it out, and then I'm relaxed and I can play through it.
What was the bit about Ricky and Gordon's song that made it a little bit scary?
There was something about the way that he voiced some of the clusters as it moves through the thing. And I was like, it didn't really sit in my hands very well. I have very small hands, which is weird because I play Jason's stuff and he's got much bigger hands than I do. But for some reason, I just couldn't find the hand positions to figure out shape because I also work by shape. When I feel jazz chords, I feel them by shape, 13s and 9s and stuff like that. So when I see them on the page, I can instantly have my hand in a certain shape and I could reach for them. And with Ricky's stuff, it's very different, and you have to kind of look at it because it harmonically has a direction, but he also throws in little, mines along the way that kind of at you. Do you know what I mean?
I
And so you
do.
have to really kind of dissect it and figure out his logic to it. And it's so I love Ricky so much. Oh my God, his music, so beautiful.
Yeah, he's wonderful. Well, here's a question from
Yeah,
Braden. Got here a
yeah.
little late. May I've missed it, but no, you didn't, Braden. Actually, this is a brand new question. What's been your favorite run to work on, and any particular reasons?
They're all, I mean, listen, it's so cliche, but they're all favorites for a different reason. I have to tell you guys about the show that nobody knows that I did. Well, the show that nobody knows, but also that I happen to be on, which was my very first Broadway show, which was Never Gonna Dance, which was so special for a lot of reasons. First of all, it was my Broadway debut just in general. It was my Broadway debut as a conductor, and it was my Broadway debut as a music arranger. And it was a show that was all Jerome Kern music from the movie Swing Time and Beyond. We took a lot of Jerome Kern music and put it in there. Michael Greif was the director, and Jerry Mitchell was the choreographer. And I had met Michael at Williamstown, and I had done 3 of the 9 Noel Coward Tonight at 8:30 plays with him. And so he asked me to be a part of this workshop of Never Gonna Dance. And because it was my first, and because it was the kind of thing where like I was represented by my piano playing, but also the writing that I was doing, and being a full part of that ensemble, it was really very, very special. But each one after that, whether it was Brooklyn or The Wedding Singer or Legally Blonde or Prince of Broadway, I mean, working with Hal, each one of them has things about them that are so special that even though I haven't had like a long running hit, the fact that I've gotten to work with the people that I've gotten to work with over the last almost 20 years has been truly wonderful and beautiful.
A question from someone, we do not see your name over here, but the question is, other than the infamous shoe incident, what other mishaps or wacky things happened during your run of Legally Blonde?
Well, there was the time that the golf cart went into the pit. That's
Oh.
literally one of the best things.
Ah.
I cannot tell you how petrified I was. I think it was out of town. I think it was at the Golden Gate in San Francisco where this happened, where Kevin Pariseau was driving the golf cart in the What You Want scene. And he's driving, do, and all of a sudden it turned the wrong way. And I don't know why it turned the wrong way, whether he lost control of it, whatever. But it headed towards the pit, and it fell in like about like this. It didn't go all the way in, but it fell over the lip, and we had the net up there, whether it was Broadway or San Francisco, it doesn't matter because it was the same, but we had like the net, and all the string players, no idea what was going on. They had no idea, and I was like literally at the podium, because remember, I'm piano conducting that thing, so it's like I had to kind of keep everything together, and everybody said they could see my eyes just bug out, and that was not my favorite moment, but we recovered and we made a bit out of it, as you always do, and that was it.
How did you get into Airbnb and soul?
Well, it started back in college. I was home from college, and a friend of mine who was also a music student but in a different university, a friend of mine from high school, he was at Miami and I was at IU, and and he played for me. We went out one night to grab some drinks and whatever, and we like sat in his car, and he's like, I really need you to hear this record. And I was like, what is it? And he said, it's Stevie Wonder's Inner Visions. And I said, I don't really like Stevie Wonder. He's like, why not? I said, well, I'm not a huge fan of I Just Called to Say I Love You or Part-Time Lover. He's like, hang on. And he played me the opening track of Inner Visions, and my mind like just exploded, because by that point I was a really heavy jazz player, and he was using these harmonies that I'd never heard in any kind of music on the radio whatsoever. And the song was Too High, if you know the record, and if you don't, now you do. Too High is the name of it. And the opening vamp is like, It's just like a simple A minor thing, and then all of a sudden it does this chromatic, like, it's all over the place, and you're like, wait, what is this? And then it's got this real deep groove to it, and I was hooked. And that was the beginning of it. And then once I got to do Radiant Baby with Billy, well, with the people at the Public Theater, and there was a laundry list of people who were just starting their career who were either in that show or part of it. But Billy plucked me out of obscurity. He was like, "What's your name?" And that's when that started. And then he started to feed me the gospel and a lot deeper stuff for me to kind of get my ears around. And so my love for it probably started around like 93 when I was about 22, 23, something like that.
And then you went on. How long after that did you meet Billy Porter?
Yeah. And then that was about exactly a decade later. I met Billy on the show, and we've been together ever since. It's the longest partnership either one of us have ever had, be it personal or professional, which is crazy. But
how did it get started, and how has it evolved?
It got started because for whatever reason, he just felt something about the way that I was approaching the material in Radiant Baby, which Radiant Baby was this unbelievable show, which I hope someday has a real New York production with a run, because we did a very limited run in 2003 at the Public, and it was with Danny Reichert and Aaron Lohr and Kate Jennings Grant and Billy and Michael Winther, like, and what's her Selena Carvajal, who now, Lena Hall was in it as a kid, and Tracy B. There were so many people that like have gone on to great stuff that were in this moment. And in that space, it was a very funk show. It was really based around funk, R&B, and disco. And I came in and auditioned and got the gig. And so Billy heard me approach this score, and he was like, his ears perked up. And he didn't really understand like why he had never heard of me. And by that, I was very brand new in the city. I had only been doing stuff at Williamstown as music director or, music supervisor. But I hadn't broken into New York yet. So he couldn't understand why he didn't know about me. And the next thing I know, he like takes me under his wing. And he's like, "We're doing a show." And I was like, "Okay, you're the great Billy Porter. Like, I don't understand how I got here." And then he also told me that there wasn't going to be a band. It was just me, a drummer, and a backup singer. And I was terrified. I was like, in front of everybody? He's like, "Yep, everybody's going to be there." And I was like, "Oh boy." And eventually I got over my fear. We did it, and we've been together ever since. And it's developed because we both have a very distinct aesthetic about what we love about the theater and keeping storytelling first. The music serves the story always, but the way that we do it is very much rooted in traditions that are outside the normal realm of composers or orchestrators who work in the theater full time. And it's always about trying to kind of add an aesthetic from the outside world to make the storytelling richer for the stories that we're telling. And so we've grown together, and we have a certain shorthand when we write our stuff together, that he'll tell me something very basic and I'll take that and run with it. And there's very few words that go between us. Like the arrangements I did for the Soul of Rogers record, that came from us doing a show that we worked with Stephen Sondheim back in 2006 and 2008. So it was the kind of thing that was like, it's an ever developing process, and we have a shorthand, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
So what sorts of words would he tell you, and like where would that take you? Do you have an example, whether it's real or just coming up with it?
I'm trying to think of what Billy has this tendency when we're working together. I'll play around with chords like we did an arrangement of You Gotta Be Carefully Taught for India Arie on the latest record, and I forget, how did that start? Yeah, it was but that's how it ended up. At first, I put my hands down, and I was sort of like, or something. And he was like, "Nope." And he's like, "Well, maybe." Yes, that. Write it down. Write it down. Write it down. Write it down. That's all he would tell me, because I'm an improvising musician, I can't remember a thing that I do. So I literally have to write it down. He's like, "I'm going in the other room, write that down. That's it." And then by then, that was the hook. and I sent it to India, and she knew exactly what to do with it, because up until then she heard the original from South Pacific, and she couldn't understand how to get inside it. And for me, that's my favorite track on the record now, because it came out of something post-election and something very pure, but it's because of the way that Billy and I worked together that I came up with the sketch, and he was like, "That's the thing."
We've got a question here from someone else whose name we do not see on our end, but the question is, who did the keyboard programming for Legally Blonde? Is it mostly the programmer or the arranger that decides on that perfect synth sound for any moment in the show?
Good question. For that one, it was a guy named Erwin Fish, who is the professor of film composition right now at NYU. Erwin spent a lot of time on the road in the 80s and 90s with Bette Midler as her key two player, and he's a fantastic rhythm section player. But he was delving into synth programming because he did a lot of what they used to call industrials, which still kind of happen, but not a lot. And when you do these industrials, you have to have sounds handy. And he was part of a crew of people that got their hands on the first receptors, which, if you don't know what a receptor is, it's the pre-main stage, what we use to do plugins. And it was a beast. It was PCOS. It was really, really slow and clunky, but you could get the good sounds in there. And so we used that. So Erwin was the guy. In terms of the arranger, no, I would say that like Larry and I had a handle on the stuff that we wanted to tweak once it was in there. Or we worked with Chris Yankee and talked about what he was thinking, and then I would kind of pass that on to Erwin in terms of the programming. But we didn't really, as arrangers, have a hand in the initial getting the sounds in the receptor and then to the boards. It was really about Erwin figuring out how to do that. Once it was there and we had opinions on stuff, then we could go in and tweak. And I knew the instruments he was using, so I could help out a little bit with that on my free time. But it was mostly Erwin that sat there every day, and whatever notes we had, if it was a filter or an oscillator, whatever it was that we wanted to deal with, or a range or a mapping, zoning issues, anything that we did, Erwin did all of that.
Before we let you go, would you have any chance, anything to play for us?
Didn't I play enough? Oh my God.
You did play a bunch. You don't have to, but since you're there, and since we love hearing you play.
Let's see, what's a good one? Let's see. Well, I'm looking at Harlem, right? So I'm up in Harlem, USA. So I feel like, I don't know, my headphones might get in the way, but let's see what happens.
Yes, that was so fun. Thank you for that. We have one last question, which you just led us into beautifully with that beautiful improvisation. Braden wants to know, as an improviser, do you prefer a fully written book or slashes?
Yeah, so here's the long and short answer. The short and long answer. The short answer is I prefer both for theater. I prefer both for theater because there are specific counterlines and specific things to get you started. But if it's the kind of thing where it's a groove and I want to be able to kind of put a little bit of myself into it, then I want to see the beginning of the groove, and then I want to see slashes after that. But when it's something that's very technically specific or harmony specific or note specific, for a lick, for a thought, like with Jason's stuff, I'll want to see stuff eventually. And with Honeymoon, it started out with slashes and then it ended up being fully written out. So he could write around me and vice versa. I could play around what he was giving me. But it depends on the situation.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending your time with us. Thank you so much for this upcoming Airbnb and soul orchestration class that's starting tomorrow. We're so excited to have you on board. And thanks everyone for tuning in live. Bye, James.
Bye.